The plain stretched wide and empty, scorched under a sun that knew no mercy. Dust clung to everything, horse hooves, boots, eyelids, and hung in the air like an old sorrow that refused to settle. Colt Avery rode through it with the quiet focus of a man who'd forgotten how to speak to the world and wasn't interested in trying again. He didn't aim for Whistle Ridge. He didn't aim for anywhere anymore. His compass was silence, his map regret. Places blurred together. Same saloons, same lies, same shadows. But the way that boy looked at him through the fence that morning stopped him like a bullet to the ribs. "Sir, could you pretend to be my daddy, just for one day?" The voice had cracked on the last word. Just a whisper, but it had weight. Enough to pull years of buried memories up from the grave like ghosts eager to claw at the surface. He should have kept riding. He almost did. But the kid had eyes like his boy. Not the same color. Eli's were green, his son's had been a bright blue, but the same weariness. That hollow, grown too fast look children weren't supposed to carry. Colt had dismounted slowly, not saying a word. The kid stayed on the other side of the splintered fence, clutching a tin toy pistol in one hand and a wrinkled paper in the other. Colt recognized it as a flyer, Orphan's Day adoption picnic, big smiling fonts and fake promises. "One day," the boy said again as if negotiating with something bigger than either of them. Colt stared down at him. Then finally he nodded. "One day." Now, riding through the narrow path into Whistle Ridge, Colt wondered if he'd just lied to a child for the first time in years. It didn't sit right, but then again nothing did anymore. The town emerged from the shimmer of heat like something half-dreamed, small, worn, and bracing for whatever it didn't see coming. The sheriff stood outside his office, arms crossed and chewing a toothpick like it owed him something. He caught Colt's eye as the drifter passed but didn't move. Recognition flashed, brief as lightning, and then disappeared. Colt didn't wave. Didn't stop. He went where the boy Eli had said to meet him, behind the bakery, where the smell of old dough and ashes clung to the alley walls. Eli waited there, washed as best as a boy could, wearing a frayed vest and a too-big hat that drooped over one ear. He held it in place with one hand and offered Colt a crooked smile. "You came," he said as if it surprised him. Colt gave a grunt that might have meant yes. "Got a name, kid?" "Eli," the boy said. "Short for Elijah. But no one calls me that, 'cept Miss Parker when she's mad." "Colt," the man replied. "Short for nothing. They walked together down the dusty main street. People watched. Not many said anything, but they looked, because a man like Colt didn't just show up with a boy, and certainly not with one who called him daddy loud enough for half the town to hear. "Don't say that so much," Colt muttered. "Why not?" "It's pretend," Eli said, too sharp for his age. "You don't gotta mean it." Colt stopped walking. Looked down. Pretend or not, words got weight. Eli shrugged. "So does being alone." They kept walking. The boy tugged him toward the barber's shop first. "All the real daddies take their kids in for a trim before the picnic," Eli said almost academically. "So I thought." Colt didn't speak, just opened the door. Inside smelled of shaving soap and old tobacco. The barber, a lanky man with a handlebar mustache, looked up and smiled uncertainly. "Look at you two," he said. "New faces." "My dad needs a trim," Eli said quickly. "He's new to town. Real mean with a revolver. But he don't say much." Colt leveled a dry look at the boy. "You talk enough for both of us." The barber chuckled and waved him to the chair. Colt sat. Eli beamed like he'd won a prize, legs swinging off a stool in the corner. The trim was fast, mechanical. Colt felt lighter with every snip, but no freer. Just more like someone being sculpted into a role he'd never rehearsed. They left the shop and headed to the general store. Colt bought a jar of candy sticks, root beer flavored, and handed one to Eli, who tried to act unimpressed but failed. "You always travel alone?" the boy asked, chewing slowly. Colt nodded. "Don't trust company." "Not even kids?" "Especially kids." "That's fair." They sat on the edge of the boardwalk watching a wagon creak past, drawn by a pair of bored-looking mules. The silence between them stretched, not awkward, just long. The kind of quiet that comes when two people are thinking about different things but wish they weren't. Colt noticed a scar just above Eli's collarbone. Small but sharp-edged. He didn't ask about it. Yet. "Miss Parker's the one in charge of the orphanage," Eli said eventually. "She ain't bad if you don't cry. Or talk back. Or breathe too loud." "You tellin' me she hurts you?" Colt asked, voice low. Eli hesitated. "She don't like being questioned. But she don't hit me no more." Colt narrowed his eyes. "No more?" The boy shifted. "I'm careful now. That's all." Colt didn't answer. But he didn't need to. His fingers curled unconsciously, remembering the feel of a badge, the cold steel of a trigger. They walked on. At the livery stable, they visited the horses, Eli patting their necks and whispering made-up names. The boy told stories, about a dragon horse he dreamed of riding, about his real parents whose faces he couldn't remember anymore. Colt listened. Not because he had to, but because something in him started to feel hollow when the boy stopped talking. Later, as they sat on the hillside outside town, Eli skipped stones across the surface of a dry creek bed. "I think you used to be somebody," he said suddenly. Colt didn't move. "What makes you think I'm not now? You walk like you lost something you can't find. That's usually a clue." Colt looked at the horizon. "Everyone's lost something." The boy nodded. "Yeah, I lost everything." The wind picked up, lifting dust into slow spirals. The sun dipped lower, bleeding gold into the sky. "My wife and son were killed," Colt said, the words like rusted nails torn free. "Ambushed on the road by a gang called the Caldwells." Eli blinked, lips parting. "I was a lawman once. Good one. But when I found him, what they did? I didn't arrest nobody. Just shot him, till the bullets ran out. After that, I rode." Silence pressed in. "Did it help?" Eli asked. "No," Colt said. "But it felt honest." They sat together, nothing left to say for a long time. As the sky turned violet, they headed back into town. The Orphan's Day picnic would be tomorrow. Colt had told himself he'd leave before sunrise, ride out and never look back. But now, as the boy gripped his hand with quiet certainty, he wasn't so sure. They reached the orphanage gate. Miss Parker watched them from the porch, eyes like flint, jaw set. She said nothing as Eli walked past her and inside. But her gaze stayed on Colt. He didn't flinch, didn't blink, just tipped his hat slightly and turned away. Halfway down the road, he noticed something nailed to a post outside the sheriff's office. A wanted poster. "Jedediah Caldwell are alive or dead, $500 reward." Colt stood still. The wind tugged at the paper like it was trying to hide it from him. But it was too late. The past had caught up. He turned his back on the poster. For now. Tomorrow he'd pretend to be a father. Just for one day. But deep down, a part of him knew. Pretending only works for so long before it becomes something else entirely. The sun climbed lazy and mean over Whistle Ridge, casting long shadows across the warped boards of the orphanage porch. The town woke in fits, shopkeepers unlocking doors, horses shaking off flies, children laughing somewhere distant. But Colt Avery moved through it like a storm cloud in denim. The boy trotted beside him, sharp-eyed and underfed, adjusting his vest every few steps like it might fool someone into thinking he belonged to a different life. "Miss Parker says the family starts showing up around noon," Eli said, kicking a pebble into the street. "That gives us time to make an impression." Colt raised an eyebrow. "What kind of impression are we supposed to make?" "The kind where they don't think you're gonna rob them." Colt scratched the edge of his jaw, unshaven from the day before. "That's fair." Eli led him toward the town square, which had begun to take on the awkward excitement of an event people wanted to be over as soon as it started. Paper streamers flapped in the heat. 2 wooden tables were set with tin cups and lemonade. A makeshift sign above the chapel door read, "Welcome future families," in looping, overly hopeful handwriting. "I hate this part," Eli muttered, stopping short of the square. Colt looked down at him. "Thought this was what you wanted. One day, remember? One day's not supposed to hurt." The boy's voice had lost its sass. Colt looked at the faces already gathering. Women in calico dresses, men in stiff boots, eyes scanning the orphans like livestock. No one had noticed them yet. "Let's make it count," Colt said. They stepped into the light. Almost immediately heads turned. Whispers followed. Colt had expected that, expected the weight of old stares, of memories people couldn't quite place. But what he didn't expect was how tightly Eli took his hand, like a lifeline thrown from a drifting wreck. They walked from table to table. Eli played the part well, introducing Colt with cheerful pride, telling strangers how his pa was a real cowboy, knew how to read trail signs and gut a rattlesnake. Colt didn't correct him. He played along, nodding quietly, offering tight-lipped smiles and the occasional ma'am. It should have felt like theater. It didn't. It felt like walking through the version of his life he never got to live. A girl in braids asked Eli if Colt was really his daddy. "Course he is," Eli said. "He just found me late. Like in the stories." Colt's throat dried. The lie echoed louder every time it was told. They moved to the lemonade table. Eli poured 2 cups and handed one to Colt with a grin. "You're better at this than I thought," Colt said. I'm just trying to keep you from looking so miserable. Colt chuckled, quiet, almost foreign to his own ears. You're doing fine. As they sipped, a man stepped forward from the crowd. Tall, built like a corn silo with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. He wore a brown duster and a preacher's collar, but Colt could smell the wrongness before the man even spoke. You the boy's father? The man asked. Today, Colt replied. Strange how fast bonds form between strangers. He glanced down at Eli. He's one of ours, you know. Part of the Lord's flock. Colt didn't respond. Eli moved closer to his side. The man offered a handshake. Pastor Jeremiah Lang. I'm on the board that runs the orphanage. Colt didn't take the hand. Ain't much of a churchgoer. Lang withdrew it without flinching. We look after the children's spiritual and moral upbringing. Miss Parker runs the day-to-day. Perhaps you've met her. I have. She's strict. But children need firmness. His eyes lingered on Eli like he was appraising a carving. Some are more unruly than others. Colt leaned in slightly. Unruly doesn't mean unwanted. Lang's smile faltered just a hair. No, it doesn't. But it often means unsalvageable. Before Colt could reply, Eli yanked on his coat. Let's go see the horses, Pa. Colt followed him without a word. Behind the chapel, away from the laughter and music, they found a pen of old nags saddled for rides. The volunteer handling them looked bored, half asleep under his hat. Eli picked the smallest horse and swung a leg over it like he'd done it 100 times. You all right? Colt asked, adjusting the stirrup. I don't like that man, Eli said. The preacher. Me neither. He comes by the orphanage a lot. Says he's helpin'. But sometimes kids leave with him and don't come back. Colt's jaw tensed. You ever see where he takes them? Nope. Just gone the next day. Miss Parker says they got lucky. Colt filed the words away like ammunition. Something stank, and it wasn't just the horses. Eli rode in slow circles. The sun beat down hotter now, and somewhere across town, a bell rang for the pie competition. Colt stayed quiet, arms crossed, eyes always scanning. The preacher stood on the porch again, talking to Miss Parker, her face pinched like it was carved from bone. They both glanced in his direction. Don't suppose you'll be talking off tomorrow? Eli said from the saddle. That what you want? Eli shrugged. Ain't up to me. Some things are. I didn't ask you to fix anything, the boy said. Just to stay one day. I get it if that's all you can do. Colt watched the boy's hands, small fingers gripping leather reins. What if I stayed longer? Eli looked at him, eyes unreadable. Why? Colt didn't answer. Couldn't. The truth hadn't settled in his chest yet. Before the moment could stretch too long, a rifle crack split the air, distant, but close enough to freeze every head in town. People turned toward the sound. Another crack followed, sharper this time. Not celebration. Not warning. Gunfire. Colt's hand went to his hip. Nothing there but an empty belt. He swore under his breath and yanked Eli off the saddle. Go inside. Now. But. Now Eli. The boy obeyed, running toward the chapel with other panicked children. Colt sprinted toward the noise, down the alley between the general store and the smithy. He moved low, fast, habits of old rising like a second skin. The sheriff lay face down in the dirt, blood pooling beneath his chest, badge glinting in the sun like an accusation. Colt knelt beside him, 2 fingers on his neck. Nothing. Shot from behind. Boot prints in the dust led north toward the ridge. Colt stood slowly, eyes narrowed, mind racing. This wasn't a robbery. This was a message. He returned to the square. The preacher was calming townsfolk, voice syrupy and smooth, saying it must have been hunters, nothing to worry about. But his eyes flicked toward Colt, sharp and calculating. Eli ran up breathless. What happened? Sheriff's dead. The boy paled. What now? Colt looked around. The people. The children. The predator in a preacher's coat. Now, he said, I figure out why. They walked back toward the orphanage. Miss Parker stood at the gate, arms folded. She didn't ask where they'd been. You'll be returning the boy now, she said. Colt didn't stop walking. Not today. You've had your one day. That's the rule. Colt glanced down at Eli. Some rules need breaking. She stepped forward, voice tight. You'll regret this. He met her eyes. Lady Regret and I are old friends. But if anything happens to this boy while I'm in town, I promise you, God won't get there first. They walked past her. That night, Colt sat outside the saloon, back against the wall, bottle at his side untouched. The street was quiet, too quiet for a town that just lost its law. He lit a match, held it to a cigarette, and watched it burn down. Then his eyes drifted to the wanted poster still fluttering on the sheriff's wall. Jet Caldwell. Alive or dead? Colt leaned back, exhaled smoke, and muttered to the dark. Should have stayed gone. But in his chest something was stirring. Something heavy. Something alive. And for the first time in years he didn't feel like running. Colt didn't sleep that night, not in any real sense. He stayed in the chair on the porch of the boarding house, boots up, hat low, revolver across his lap like an old habit he hadn't shaken. The bottle at his feet stayed corked. He didn't drink any more when he needed his hands steady. The town was quieter than it should have been. No drunkards stumbling from saloons, no dogs barking at shadows, not even the whisper of wind moving through the trees. Still, Colt felt something watching. Waiting. Eli had gone to bed after a supper of beans and stale cornbread, curled up under the wool blanket like a puppy pretending it wasn't afraid of thunder. Before he dozed off, he'd asked Colt if he was leaving in the morning. No, Colt had said. It was the first time he'd said that word and meant it in years. Now, in the dead of night, Colt watched Miss Parker's window glow briefly with lamplight before darkening again. She was restless too. And the preacher? He hadn't gone home at all. Colt had seen him pacing in the chapel long after midnight, muttering into candlelight. They were planning something. He could feel it in his bones. By sunrise, Colt had made his decision. He walked into the sheriff's office, still roped off, still blood-stained, and found what he needed. The back room was dusty, filled with things a dead man had probably meant to clean up someday. But the rifle was oiled. Ammunition boxes stacked in the corner, untouched. Colt took one, loaded the Winchester with muscle memory, and slung it across his back. He left the badge where it lay. Outside, Whistle Ridge stirred. Townsfolk moved slower today. The square was still, the decorations from the day before now faded and flapping in the breeze like forgotten promises. Colt found Eli sitting on the edge of the well, staring into the rippling surface as if expecting to see something more than water. You hungry? Colt asked. Eli shook his head. I dreamed they came for you. Took you away. Who? People with torches and rope. Nobody stopped him. Colt crouched beside him. I ain't going anywhere. Not until you're safe. That's just a word grown-ups say when they don't know what else to promise. Colt smiled, thin and worn. Then let's turn it into something real. They ate breakfast at the bakery, mostly in silence. Word had already spread about Colt arming himself. The looks he got weren't curious anymore, they were cautious. Respectful maybe. But nervous. Folks remembered the man he'd been. A woman approached their table, a schoolteacher, judging by the chalk dust on her fingers and the way her eyes lingered kindly on Eli. Mr. Avery, she said, uncertain. Colt didn't correct her. He just looked up. There's talk that Pastor Lang is petitioning to have you removed from town. He claims you're endangering the children. Colt set down his fork. I'm protecting one. He says you're harboring a violent nature. That the sheriff's death is connected to you somehow. Colt leaned back. He's not wrong about the violent part. But the sheriff died because someone didn't want justice walking these streets anymore. She hesitated. What do you intend to do? Find out what happened. Keep Eli out of a grave while I do. The teacher nodded slowly. Then you should speak with Hank Miller. He used to be a ranch hand for Lang. Left town last spring. But I saw him yesterday camped near the old mill. Might know things. Colt stood. Appreciate the lead. Eli followed him out without question, still chewing a bite of bread. They rode out on borrowed horses, Colt with a loose grip on the reins, Eli gripping the saddle horn like it might disappear from under him. The land around Whistle Ridge was dry and open, scrub brush and brittle grass stretching toward the hills. The mill sat broken near a dried-up creek bed, its wheel rotted and sagging. They found Hank Miller leaning against a tree stump, skin like leather and eyes that squinted against the sun like he resented it. You got a good reason to bring a kid here? He asked as Colt dismounted. He's part of the reason, Colt said. Heard you worked for Lang. Hank spat. I worked near Lang. The man doesn't trust anyone enough to let them too close. You ever see him take kids off orphanage property? Hank's eyes narrowed. A few times. Said it was for private instruction. Always came back alone. The ones he took didn't. Colt glanced at Eli then back. You think he was selling them? I think he was doing worse. Colt's stomach turned. Why didn't you tell the sheriff? I did. Sheriff said there wasn't enough to act on. And that Lang had friends in higher places. Colt nodded slowly, jaw tight. Thank you. They rode back in silence. The weight of the information sat heavy between them. Eli didn't ask questions. You didn't need to. That afternoon, Colt stood in the center of the town square and called out, voice clear, loud, and heavy with purpose. Whistle Ridge, I need your ears. Doors opened. Faces emerged. Curiosity drew them like moths. Sheriff's dead, and we all know it wasn't a hunting accident. I believe someone in this town is hiding worse than a murderer behind a Bible and a stitched smile. Lang stepped forward from the chapel steps, arms raised like a man delivering salvation. Friends, this is the danger I warned you of. This man is broken, lost to violence and delusion. Colt kept his voice steady. You calling me a liar, preacher? I'm calling you exactly what you are, a drifter who thrives on chaos. You're not here to help that boy. You're here to rewrite your guilt. Colt stepped forward, slow and steady. Tell them about the children who never came back. Tell them about Hank Miller. Lang paled, then recovered. A drunk? A disgruntled employee? You'll use the words of a bitter man to attack the Lord's work. You ain't got the Lord behind you, Colt said. Just secrets and silence. Miss Parker appeared beside Lang, clutching a folder. Records, Colt guessed. She looked rattled but held her ground. Eli stepped beside Colt. He's lying. I saw things. I heard kids crying in the chapel basement. There's a locked door. Always locked. Lang raised his hand like a viper striking. You dare believe the word of an orphan over the house of God? Colt drew his rifle, not to aim but to remind. I believe the word of a child over the snake oil you're sellin' da. A murmur passed through the crowd. Uncertainty. Doubt. Then the teacher from earlier stepped forward. I've seen bruises. Heard stories. We can't ignore it anymore. Others followed. Quiet voices at first, then louder. Accusations. Confessions. Lang's face twisted, his composure slipping like melted wax. You're all damned, he hissed. All of you. Colt stepped onto the chapel porch and kicked the door in. The townsfolk followed. They found the basement door, locked just like Eli said. Colt shot it open. Inside were crates, clothes, toys, personal effects, evidence, and behind them a ledger. Names, dates, payments. Miss Parker crumpled. Lang tried to run. Colt caught him in the yard, tackled him into the dirt, and drove a fist into his jaw that cracked like a branch snapping. The preacher went still. As the dust settled, the town watched in stunned silence. Truth had broken loose. It couldn't be caged again. That evening, the townsfolk gathered quietly. The teacher took over the orphanage, promising reform. Miss Parker would face charges along with Lang. Colt handed over the ledger. He didn't need to carry those names. As the stars rose, Eli sat beside him on the porch, legs swinging. Do I still only get one day? He asked. Colt looked at the boy. You get however many you need. Even forever? Colt didn't smile. But something in him softened. Yeah, even that. And for the first time in years, he let himself believe it might be true. The days that followed were filled with slow repairs, of buildings, of trust, of the kind of silence that had allowed evil to sit undisturbed for far too long. The people of Whistle Ridge had seen the mask ripped clean off what they'd mistaken for virtue, and now they struggled with the shame of looking the other way for so long. Colt didn't gloat. He didn't claim victory. He stayed in the background, a steady shadow by Eli's side, helping where he could, watching over the boy like he owed him something far deeper than protection. And maybe he did. Maybe Eli was the first soul who'd looked at him and seen something worth saving. They buried the children's things in a quiet grove just beyond the ridge, no markers, just a circle of townsfolk who whispered prayers that would never quite be enough. Colt didn't speak. He only stood there with his hat in his hands, heart knotted in his throat, teeth clenched around something too big for words. Lang had been handed over to the marshals. Miss Parker too. They went without much fight, hollowed out from exposure. But justice, as it usually did, moved slow. The people knew they'd need to testify, and some of them still struggled with the weight of what they'd allowed. Colt tried not to think about what might have happened if Eli hadn't whispered through that fence. It was 3 days later when trouble rode into town again. Dust on the horizon, too much for just travelers. Colt was standing outside the chapel, helping hammer boards across broken windows when he saw it. 5 riders. Wide brims. Long coats. Dusty rifles slung low. Not lawmen. Gunmen. He moved fast, ushered Eli inside the schoolhouse with the teacher, then stepped out to meet them alone. They stopped at the edge of town, hooves stamping, snorting. One rider dismounted and stepped forward. Tall, lean, mouth set in a humorless line. You Colt Avery? He asked. Colt didn't flinch. Who's asking? Name's Cyrus Boone. You killed my brother. Back in New Mexico. Mining town. 2 years ago. Colt thought back. There had been a lot of blood in New Mexico. A lot of regret too. Didn't ask his name. Just knew he was robbing a bank full of workers' pay. Shot 3 people before I put him down. Cyrus' eyes flared. You call that justice? I call it what it was. Cyrus looked around, took in the buildings, the quiet faces watching from windows. Funny thing about justice, it's got a long memory. So do I. Colt stepped down from the chapel porch. His hand rested near his holster. You come for revenge or you come for show? Cyrus smirked. Both. The others dismounted. 5 in all. Colt could take 2, maybe 3 before they dropped him. But not all. Not with certainty. He needed an edge. Something unexpected. Then the schoolhouse door opened. And Eli stepped out. Get back inside. Colt snapped. Eli didn't listen. He walked slowly across the dirt road until he was beside Colt. His eyes were steady, filled with the kind of defiance that doesn't come from courage but from having nothing left to lose. You don't have to do this, the boy said, not to Colt but to Cyrus. Cyrus looked at him, puzzled. You his son? No, Eli said. But I asked him to be. Just for a day. The words hung there, strange and aching. Cyrus blinked. Well, that's real heartwarming. But I didn't ride all this way to listen to fairy tales. Colt moved in front of Eli. Then you best take your shot. But I'll warn you, if you pull iron, I won't stop until every last one of you is down or I am. Cyrus smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. He flicked his fingers. The men spread out. Let's make this interesting, Cyrus said. You and me. 1-on-1. Draw at the bell. There ain't no bell, Colt said. There will be. From the saloon, the barkeep stepped out, holding a cowbell from behind the bar. His hand shook. His eyes avoided everyone. Colt exhaled. The town still watched, but now they were witnesses. This was a reckoning. He stepped into the center of the square. Boots in the dust. Fingers twitching. Cyrus did the same. Eli stood back, eyes wide. You sure about this? Colt asked. Cyrus gave a short nod. Then the bell rang. Colt's hand flew down like thunder. The sound of metal clearing leather, the sharp crack of a revolver echoing like lightning over hills. 2 shots. 1 breath. Then silence. Cyrus dropped. Chest heaving. Colt's bullet had hit him low in the gut. Not dead yet, but he would be. Colt turned to the others. You want to finish what he started? They didn't. Guns were holstered. Horses mounted. They rode off without a word, leaving their leader to die where he fell. Colt crouched beside him. You didn't have to do it, Cyrus coughed. You gave me no choice. I just wanted my brother back. We all want someone back, Colt said. Cyrus nodded once, then didn't move again. The town was silent. Then Eli ran to Colt and hugged him hard around the waist. The boy's body shook. He didn't cry, just trembled with the kind of release that comes after too long carrying too much. Colt put a hand on his head. You all right? I thought I'd lose you too. You won't, Colt said low. Not now. Not ever. They buried Cyrus the next day. No ceremony. Just dust and stone. Later Miss Whitaker, the teacher, brought out a paper for Eli. He held it up and read it slowly, carefully, each word like a stone set into place. It was a certificate. Adoption. Official. Colt had signed it without ceremony. Just walked into the office and did it. Eli looked up. You really mean it? Colt didn't answer right away. He looked out toward the hills, where the sun had begun to fall in streaks of gold and fire. The same hills he'd always imagined riding off toward. Alone. Silent. Done with people. With promises. With hope. But not anymore. Now he had a reason to stay. A reason to rebuild. I do, Colt said finally. More than anything I've ever said. They stood there, side by side, wind moving through the tall grass like a slow, whispering hymn. And though the town would never forget what had happened, though the scars of truth would always live beneath the surface of its dusty charm, something new had begun. Something honest. Something earned. Colt was no longer just a drifter with a bloody past. He was a father. Eli was no longer an orphan at the fence. He was home. And for the first time in a long time, Whistle Ridge watched the sunset not with dread, but with a quiet kind of peace, earned, hard-won, and sacred. The kind of peace only found at the end of a long, hard ride.